Welcome to Politically Georgia from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I'm Greg Bluestein here with Patricia Murphy. What's up, Patricia?
Greg, everything's up. If it's Georgia politics, everything is up.
Especially according to our, well, not everything
Until we
is
start
up.
talking about poll results,
According
actually.
to our polls.
Take that back. Otherwise, it's great to see you.
Yeah, well, and we'll have an entire edition on our polls on Tuesday's episode, although we'll touch on them today, I'm sure, because it's Monday, and that means it's time for one of our favorite episodes of the week, Monday Mailbag. We'll be answering your questions about Georgia politics that are called in to our hotline or texted in at 770-810-5297 or sent via email, politicallygeorgia@ajc.com. Patricia, what questions are you looking most forward to?
I am looking for, actually, we have gotten a few questions from readers who sent it straight to our inboxes. That's greg.bluestein@ajc.com. We love hearing directly from readers. And it actually was a listener who listened to an episode and then had a question about that episode. So I'm looking forward to that one.
Okay, let's go.
Okay.
Shaney B, what have we got?
All right, well, let's start with that question. Mark wrote in asking, I was listening to your recap of the governor's primary debates and had a question about something you mentioned. That Brad Raffensperger and the Attorney General both won comfortably in 2022, yet feels like side characters in what's become a two-man Trump showdown. Looking back at Gwinnett County, a majority of primary voters there still voted in the Republican primary in 2018 and 2022, even as Democrats won big in the general. My theory is that many suburban voters who've moved away from Trump at the top of the ticket are still defaulting to GOP primaries out of habit. Is 2024 the year that finally changes?
Patricia, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this. I know that, look at 2022. The Democrats didn't really have a marquee matchup on the primary side of their battle. Warnock, Abrams, they were both always going to be the nominees for their parties for senator and governor. And there were some down ticket, real competitive battles, but there wasn't like a show-stopping contest on the Democratic side. That meant that some Democrats felt freer to vote in the Republican primary. This year, though, that's not the same. This year, there's good, really close competitive battles on the Democratic side for governor and for other races, and of course, Republican for Senate and for governor.
Yeah, every election cycle in Georgia, because the news is moving so fast, feels like a full reset. Also, because this is just such a dynamic state politically, people's party affiliations are changing. What's so interesting to me, having covered other states as well, is that Georgia voters do not register by party. And so any Georgia voter can pull any primary ballot that they want, as you mentioned. And so there was a pretty significant, a very important number of Democrats who voted in that GOP primary in 2022. That was in the midst of the Stop the Steal campaigns, the investigations into President Trump and his allies for the 2020 elections, and the president calling those elections rigged. So that felt like it was really hanging over the state still, and that played a big role in Brad Raffensperger, I would say Brian Kemp, and Chris Carr's appeal to Democrats at that time. Now, fast forward, we have this, as Mark mentioned, a two-man Republican showdown that is a pro-Trump showdown. Well, back in 2022, President Trump did play a role in the primaries, but he endorsed against both of those guys, Raffensperger and Carr. So once they got to the general, they were widely supported by Republicans, but it was a dogfight for both of them to get out of their primaries, although both of them did win more votes than some other Republicans who won theirs as well, including Burt Jones.
Yeah, and who does that hurt? Of course, that hurts the fact that more swing voters will be divided rather than going to the Republican primary this time. That hurts Chris Carr, that hurts Brad Raffensperger, that hurts the Republicans who are really depending on those independent voters. On the Democratic side, that's the Michael Thurmond, the Jeff Duncan. Those are the ones who are hoping for more of those swing voters to vote. And again, a lot of those swing voters also tend to skip primaries. They're not as fervent about either party this early in the race, so that could affect things too.
Yeah, it does feel like, though, Democrats really feel like they want to have their say in that Democratic primary. In 2022, it was already Stacey Abrams. Now you have Keisha Lance Bottoms, you have Michael Thurmond, Jeff Duncan. I mean, there are a lot of names that pop off that ballot, and Democrats are having strong feelings, all the feels about this primary coming up. So I think the Democrats already are having a large showing in the primary, according to early voting tallies, and they will continue to show up in a big way to influence the outcome of that governor's race.
Shaney B, what else we got?
Next is an email from Lanny in St. Simons. How much does the Supreme Court ruling on the Voting Rights Act change things in Georgia? Will there be another round of new maps?
Yeah, great question, Lanny. And we're still trying to figure that answer out. But the answer is likely yes, just not in time for the 2026 midterms. This was a response to the Supreme Court ruling a couple of days ago that really weakened a key part of the Voting Rights Act, that landmark bipartisan act that passed in the 60s. It changes the nature of Georgia politics, really. We're just not sure how much. There are already calls for Governor Kemp to call a special session immediately. It seems way too close to the midterm elections to have any sort of change to this year's map. And I can't completely rule it out because I can see what's happening in Louisiana. That was the heart of the case where the governor's already canceled the primaries. So there are examples of this, potentially changing the map for this year in other states. I just can't see Governor Kemp doing it. I can't rule it out either. But what I do suspect is the governor will call a special session this year to change the maps for future years. And one of the reasons why the rush? Well, one of the reasons is Republicans can't be certain that there will be a Republican governor after this year. And so they'll want to make these changes while they're certain that there's a Republican governor and a Republican majority in the General Assembly. Why take the risk? Democrats are saying that they're trying to lock in a Republican future right now, even as Democrats are threatening to flip the governor's wrench and have an outside shot at flipping the Georgia House.
Yeah, just as soon as that decision came down from the Supreme Court, we did see a number of Republican statewide candidates rush out to say there should be a special session, or in the case of Burt Jones, I endorse the idea of changing these maps. Now, Rick Jackson and Greg Dolezal both called for a special session as soon as possible to change the maps. It felt to me like that was had something to do also with President Trump, who is so hyper digital on social media all the time. It is so important to President Trump right now to redraw the maps across the country to favor Republicans, to help them in the midterms. But I completely agree with you. It's too late to do that here in Georgia. In Louisiana, early voting had not yet started, and that's where the Republican governor has signaled his plan to move the primary back and redraw the maps before that process begins. But here in Georgia, early voting had already been underway for nearly a week when this decision came out. And it does also feel like Governor Kemp is kind of looking at his legacy, and how he proceeds over the next several months is going to be a big part of that legacy. And it also feels like Republicans are worried they may not control this state in the future, even next year. And so I think you've got exactly the right read. I do think there is likely to be a special session. I don't think it will affect these primaries, but you can feel the urgency among Republicans in this state to squeeze as much power as they can out of the congressional maps and the legislative maps. This would affect state legislative seats as well as the state House and state Senate seats. So I think the momentum is going. I just don't think they've hit the gas on it.
Let me add one little thing to that too, is that I think that there will be a talk of a special session in December of this year anyway. And the reason why is because we saw the same thing way back in 2018 when Governor Deal issued basically a summons. I don't think he formally called a special session, but he alerted lawmakers before the election that there will be a special session at the end of the year to deal with some financial, I can't remember exactly what it was. And yes, there was a need to deal with the budget, but it was also looked at as a hedge just in case Stacey Abrams won that race back in 2018 for Republican lawmakers to come in and look at ways to rein in the executive power if she had won. Of course, they didn't need to do that part of it because Brian Kemp won the election. But I would not be shocked if there is some sort of talk by the fall of a special session in December, no matter what, that could be looked at as in case a Democrat wins the governor's race, to start making those moves. And if, of course, a Republican wins, there won't be any talk of such action to rein in the executive branch powers. Shaney B., what else do we have?
Grayson from Atlanta has a question a couple of other people asked about. Why is Rick Jackson's campaign running advertisements ahead of the primary against former Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms? In my mind, she's the candidate the Republican nominee will have the best chance of beating.
Yeah, that's a great question. And Patricia, I'm curious your thoughts, but to me, it just goes back to why Republicans in Georgia ran against AOC and Nancy Pelosi and other, they're already trying to bring down Keisha Lance Bottoms' negatives, right? Or bring up the negatives, bring down her positives by kind of painting her as the liberal establishment boogie woman in that sense. And, she's not the same sort of target that Stacey Abrams has been for the last decade or so for Republicans. I mean, there was a time where, like, if you were running for dog catcher or probate judge or whatever in South Georgia in a very red area, you were running against Stacey Abrams, even if she had nothing to do with your race. Keisha Lance Bottoms is not at that sort of target level that Stacey Abrams was, but I think Republicans wouldn't mind if she ended up there because they see her as the sort of strongest and likeliest potential nominee.
Yeah, totally agree. Also, why is he running these ads? Because he can. He has so much money. Rick Jackson does not have to make difficult decisions about how to use his money. He can just use all his money on this race, and he's not even going to feel it next year. The Democrats, on the other hand, are finding that their resources are so limited. None of them has run an ad against Keisha Lance Bottoms, even though she has very high potential negatives that you could easily run an ad against her. Democrats don't have the money to both promote themselves and attack Keisha Lance Bottoms in the process. The second reason I think that Rick Jackson is doing this is because I think it is almost a tryout for Republican voters to say, here's what you get if I'm your nominee. And let's assume Republican voters that Keisha Lance Bottoms is also the nominee because she really is in cruise control right now. Rick Jackson is saying, here's the attacks I would make on her. I have the money to do it. We all remember what it was like during COVID. And I am the best person positioned to make these attacks because I'm already doing it. It makes him feel like the nominee already when he's already moving on to the likely Democratic nominee with the attacks that he's showing he's eager to make.
Yeah, that's a good point. It instantly sort of elevates him as in the minds of people who see that as like, oh, that's our guy who's going to go up against Keisha Lance Bottoms. Shane P., what else we got?
Next is Tasha in Atlanta. After watching the Senate debate, I'm not sure I learned anything dramatically new about the candidates. Maybe that's normal, but with early voting starting, I'm wondering what actually counts as a win in a debate like this. Is it about landing a viral moment, avoiding a mistake, or giving undecided voters a real reason to move?
Yeah, good question.
That's
because
a great question.
This isn't like a presidential race where millions of people are watching the debates. This is more like a debate where thousands of people are watching the debate, maybe, right? It's not instantly transforming the conversation into the minds of many Georgia voters who, as we saw from the polls, are overwhelmingly undecided in these top races. I mean, the big winner in the governor's race isn't Rick Jackson or Burt Jones. It's undecided. In the Senate race, there's even more undecided. So there's a lot of undecideds out there. For these debates, Patricia, it really just seems like it's getting that Twitter, that video that you can put on social media. In some cases, you can even put money behind it. Like we know Burt Jones is already putting money behind his exchange with Rick Jackson over people in the country illegally. So to me, it's just that social media part of it.
Yeah, I feel like each of the three candidates in the Senate race, the three primary candidates in the Senate race, all had different goals, and they've defined victory as such. For Buddy Carter, I think it was just move the needle. He is really stuck there in second place and needs to move himself forward. He needs to get attention because he has not caught on quite yet with the GOP base in the way that he would like to. I think for both him and Mike Collins, it's also an audition for President Trump. He is not endorsed in this race yet. They both were eager to say, my opponent is fatally flawed. He's going to be a terrible general election candidate, and I am pro-Trump, and here are all the ways that I am pro-Trump. Buddy Carter even got to talk about red, white, and blue land, his idea to rename Greenland. I think for Derek Dooley, the goal was to not mess up. He has never had a political debate. He has never engaged in a political debate other than being the UT coach and getting pounded by reporters every Sunday or Saturday afternoon, I guess, depending on when they played. He just has never done this before. It's so much harder than it looks. And you do not want to give your opponents that viral moment to then start running ads against you. And I do think Dooley met his mark. I think the other two, if Donald Trump was watching, he's got 2 in the can. I think that's.
I mean, he's got 3 in the can.
He's got 3 in the can, and Dooley was less vocal, but also very pro-Trump. I also think Dooley, by not getting kind of involved in that mano a mano, like, you're more corrupt. No, you're more corrupt. It gave him a moment to say, hey, guess what, everybody? I'm not corrupt at all. Yeah. He could be the alternative.
He is sharpening his lane. He is sharpening that sort of like, I am not just against Democrats, I'm also against Washington lane.
Yes.
Like we got to fight Washington. We got to fight Washington corruptness. That's why he's pushing for term limits. That's why he's pushing for, more town halls, that sort of more different angle, right?
Yeah.
He's trying to, promote himself as a clear alternative, not just like the other guys.
Yeah. And the other guys kind of gave him a chance to.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a quick break. Still to come, more of your questions from the listener mailbag. And also, we're going to take some time to remember Congressman David Scott. This is Politically Georgia from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Welcome back to Politically Georgia. Greg Bluestein here with Patricia Murphy. Let's get right back into our listener mailbag with producer Shane B. What we got?
All right, we got a text message from Fred in Avondale Estates. In the Georgia State House, Representative Gabriel Sanchez, now seeking re-election, has spent his first term introducing bills to raise the minimum wage to $20, ban corporate ownership of homes, end AI-driven rental price fixing, and tax the rich, while Matheos Sampson is now running for House District 58 in Atlanta on a near-identical platform. How seriously should Georgia Democrats and Republicans be taking the Atlanta DSA's electoral strategy here? And does the mainstream Georgia Democratic Party see these candidates as allies, a threat, or something more complicated?
Fred, great question. It's something more complicated, I'll tell you that. So Gabriel Sanchez, as you said, is a member of the DSA. He is also endorsed by the Democratic Socialists of America Atlanta chapter, as is Matheos Sampson. And Matheos Sampson is running for the open seat to replace Park Cannon. There are additional DSA candidates running who are members of the DSA, not yet endorsed by the party. That is Aaron Baker, who is running against Esther Panich up in Sandy Springs, and Jeremiah Olney, who is running against Stacey Evans in Atlanta. There are other DSA candidates running in Savannah and Athens for a Fulton County Commission seat. So this is a significant trend, and I've also recently written about it, and we will soon have a full segment about the DSA candidates coming up in a later episode of Politically Georgia. But Greg, I think this is significant. It's a trend that it's sort of I'm not going to call it a hockey stick trend, but it's definitely on the upswing. And I think Democrats are really wrestling with themselves because a number of these DSA candidates are challenging sitting popular Democratic incumbents. Mm-hmm. And that's giving Democrats a lot of heartburn because they see particularly Esther Panich and Stacey Evans as excellent members of the caucus. They don't want to see them lose. At the same time, if the DSA is bringing in voters and enthusiasm and young people into the larger Democratic fold as a process, I think they're eager for that. I will say some of these DSA candidates don't consider themselves Democrats, by the way, including Olney.
Yeah, stay tuned because there will be more on this later on in a couple of days from Politically Georgia. But yeah, that's a great question, and as Patricia said, it is very complicated, and some of these challenges will go down in flames. But everyone knows the Gabriel Sanchez example. Everyone in Georgia politics knows that he went up against a very popular incumbent, a very influential incumbent, Terry Anulowicz, and she lost. And so now the difference though is all these incumbents who are facing these DSA challengers, they know to take them seriously.
Yeah.
So there will be no one being caught by surprise in this election cycle. Shani B, what else we got?
Next is an email from Cullen. I know a lot of interest has been paid to the primaries, and rightfully so. But currently on Kalshi, both races for governor and senator are favoring Democrats. For governor, the Democratic candidate is currently listed with a 59% chance of winning, and for the Senate race, the Democratic candidate has an 86% chance of winning. Both of these figures seem particularly high. Of course, it's early, but what do you make of such strong predictions for Democrats?
Patricia, you're all over Kalshi. Have you been making all these bets on on the future Georgia football games and who scores first and all that?
Greg, I bet if you were going to be on time to today's podcast.
Oh.
And
I was.
Yeah, you were.
I was.
I lost some money.
I don't know if I've ever been late.
You're never late.
I'm pretty on time.
That's why I thought the odds would be in my favor. If I won, I'd make a lot of money. To make a long story short, I do not follow Kalshi. I don't agree with Kalshi on this one either. I think Jon Ossoff obviously is favored, but we're in a 50-50 state. Literally anything could happen, Kalshi. So check your numbers. That's all I can say.
I am not a bettor on Kalshi, although I sometimes do go on and be like, why? Like the other, this was a couple weeks ago, but Jason Anavitarte had already ruled out running for the 14th district, but for some reason the odds were like 8% that he could run. And I just texted him. I was like, I guess you could bet against yourself right now if you wanted to and make some money, because only you know that you're not running and you've gone public with it. I don't understand that, right? So, sometimes it had been days after he had publicly said he wasn't running, and yet there was still you could still make some money on betting that he would run. Again, I don't understand those prediction markets. I know that they're just, sometimes though, they are spot on. I've been watching it though. It's been interesting. And it does reflect the basic Republican fears and Democratic quiet confidence about Jon Ossoff's, his outlook. He's also warning Democrats, don't get too confident, right? Don't get too confident. There's a long way to go. And Republicans are kind of saying the same thing because we don't know who will emerge from this 3-man, triple-decker primary and then likely runoff. But we can bet they're going to have money behind them because we already know that Republicans are planning to spend, Senate Republican, the financing arm is planning to spend more money than it's ever have, not counting the 2020 craziness in Georgia on backing whoever the Republican nominee will be.
Yeah. I think a much better source of information might be our new AJC poll, Greg, which is talking about all sorts of levels of support, things, at least how people feel today. I think predicting the future of an election, an election result here in Georgia in November is a fool's errand. Save your money.
You know what? Buy an AJC subscription.
Definitely. That's not a waste.
There you go. Shane B, what else we got?
Let's go to Jesse in Decatur. With Congressman David Scott's passing, there's suddenly going to be a major race for a safe Democratic congressional seat. How do races like that usually play out? Is it mostly about who has the strongest local relationships, who can raise the most money fastest, or who can build a coalition before the field gets too crowded?
Yeah, it's a good question, Jesse. There's a mix. But in this case, the unique thing is that there were several challengers to David Scott already in the race. This was not an incumbent who was going to steamroll opposition. There was really facing generational challenges from folks who were saying that he wasn't representative of the district. He wasn't being, as active in the community as he once was. They wanted generational change. He was 80. Some of the candidates running against them are in their 40s or younger, and who brought a more confrontational style. So they're already in the race. They've already been spending money. They've already been getting out there in the community, Patricia. So that makes this not the normal special election, right? Because it's not just going to be a bunch of candidates who no one's ever heard of just suddenly stepping up. There are already active campaigns going on.
Very active campaigns going on. And it's important to distinguish the fact that the May primary for David Scott's seat, which will be the winner of the seat because there won't be significant Republican opposition, that is to fill the next 2-year term in Congress for that seat. The special election, which will also happen, but after the May primary, is to fill just the remainder of David Scott's term. So when you get into the special election versus the May primary, it's just important to distinguish them in case there are different names on those ballots.
Yeah. And of course, the special election is the unexpired term. It is an important election, but the election that we're also watching even more closely is that primary for the next 2 years, because whoever gets that could be in office for a very long time. This is a deep blue seat.
That's the big prize. However, the winner of the special election will play a significant role in this Congress because margins are so tight. Democrats need somebody in that seat ASAP, and we'll see if Governor Kemp is in the mood to make that happen.
Yeah, as of this taping, the governor has not yet scheduled a special election, although by the time you hear this, he might have. He has a short window to do so, and Democrats are worried that he could, push that election back till the fall. So we'll see. Marcye Scott is the late congressman's daughter, and she intends to run in that special election. We're not exactly sure how many of the other candidates are already running in that May primary are also going to run in the special election. But Marcye Scott talked with our producer, Shane B, about her father's legacy.
He's very funny. He's a hilarious guy. He doesn't take himself that seriously. I think the biggest traits is that he instilled a lot into his family. He loved his family. And we were very close knit family. It's funny because even campaigns, everybody would call us the Scots, the Scots, the Scots, because we ran his campaigns. We had these health fairs. That was his biggest thing. There was this one young lady. She came back to one of the health fairs. Every year she comes back and speaks to my dad and thanks him again. She was pregnant with her child and she had extreme high blood pressure. And she just so happened to be at the fair at that time. And they rushed her to the hospital. But that's one of the things that, just small things that are just like almost like domino effects of his commitment to the community and the results of certain things that he implemented. And this is refreshing, okay? Even though we had to wait for opportunity like this to happen, that people are now getting it. Like, oh, okay. Or maybe your work of art, I will say, is so big, like your catalog of experience and your catalog of what you've done as a job and the jobs has only been the microscope only falls on the last couple of years. So they don't get to see or they don't even evaluate all of this history behind it, with him being the Ways and Means chairman in the Senate or the agriculture. Even that, even though it was recently, has kind of gotten, it's kind of gone under the rug with the success and how unique that experience or that accomplishment is. And I think that people, you can't hide the elephant in the room as many times as people are like, oh, he needs to go, and they need to pass the baton, or it's time for him to go, and we need term limits. I always say, we have them. It's every 2 years. When people say that he shouldn't have run for this last election, um, all I can say is that he said his job wasn't done. The constituents still wanted him. The voters still wanted him. He still had a job to do. His first love, I believe, was his constituents. And he felt like if I can serve them and be able to utilize the power that I do have, because I think that that's what a lot of people don't realize. And I had this conversation with somebody before. When you just want to dismiss or vote somebody new in, and this is just how politics is you're starting over from the ground floor. You get a new representative, they're not going to come with the power that these incumbents or these people who've been there for years. There's certain things my father could accomplish just from him, his tenure, and for him and his history and the relationships he has built. If the constituents in the 13th district were asking about funds or help with certain things in the community or in the district, he didn't have to figure out who to call, who to do. He knew these people. He had the relationships. He didn't have to go figure it out or build the relationships. And I think that people they forget about that. They don't understand that power or that position in Congress is going to be gone once he's gone.
It's Marcye Scott, the daughter of the late Congressman David Scott, saying basically her dad had the community wired. Calvin Smyre also spoke with Shane B. He is the longtime dean of the Georgia House. He has been in elected office before his retirement for almost 50 years. He was also a very close friend of the late Congressman.
The title public servant fits him well because he treated it as his everyday life, and he was a trusted warrior. He believed in service, and that's how he passed. I mean, he was doing his job, and that's one thing I can say, that he always had his knees to the grinding stone. He was always working. I think two of his legacies, one of them is the job fair that he had every year. I had been to a couple, and thousands of jobs that he helped people get, and was assistant in, and that became one of his signatures. Was the job fair became one of his signatures, and one of the other ones was his health fairs, where he was helping people get diagnosed, get health care, be able to have the services that they may not be able to get anywhere else, and it was for free. So those are two areas that jump out at me as it relates to his service, was this job fair and the health fair. You really got to know him, the inner David Scott, and I got to know the inner sometimes just a little too much, because he and I chaired the Rules Committee at the same time. David was chair of the Rules Committee in the Senate, and I was the chair of the Rules Committee in the House. And sometimes he would say, let's have our pinch ourselves moment, because you got two African Americans that which is highly unusual to have an African American share the rules anyway. But he would think that that was a picture yourself moment that we all were serving. We both were serving at the same time. Two African American men. I like to recognize Congressman David Scott as chair of the Agriculture Committee and one who did a lot for our industry here in the state of Georgia. I'm a HBCU graduate of Fort Valley State University, and I remember the call I had with him when he was trying to put money in the budget for scholarship for the 1890 land grant institutions. So it's some of those kind of things that I think will be part of his legacy as we recognize him and the service that he gave to the state of Georgia and the service that he gave to our nation. He was a good man.
Great interviews, Shaney B. Thank you for doing that and for talking more about the late congressman's legacy. He had a memorial service at the Georgia Capitol on Friday and then a funeral over the weekend on Saturday. That's going to do it for this Monday mailbag edition of Politically Georgia. If you've got a question about Georgia politics, you can call the Politically Georgia call-in hotline anytime, leave a question, and we'll play it back and answer your question right here on the show during our next Monday mailbag segment. The number is 770-810-5297. And if you enjoy what you heard, please follow, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Share Politically Georgia with a friend. We'll talk to you next time on the Politically Georgia podcast from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Thanks for listening to the Politically Georgia podcast. Our executive producer is Shane Backler. AJC's head of audio is Sam Stamler. Production support from our partners at Goat Rodeo, including Kara Schillen, Hazel Hoffman, and Max Johnston. For more of our political coverage, visit ajc.com/politicallygeorgia, and we invite you to support local journalism by subscribing to the AJC. Join us again next time on the Politically Georgia podcast from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution.